My name is Dr. Matthew Weiner. I'm a bariatric surgeon and author. I've written the books A Pound of Cure and How Weight Loss Surgery Really Works, and soon to be released, Bariatric Diet Guide and Cookbook. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about self-paying for weight loss surgery. So the most common reason that people have to self-pay for their weight loss surgery as opposed to using their insurance card is because they have what's known as a bariatric exclusion on their health insurance policy, which means the policy won't pay for bariatric surgery. We also see people who don't have health insurance, and as much as we've worked as a country to try to get as many people access to health insurance, there still are people who don't have health coverage. Also, we'll see patients who don't meet their insurance company's criteria. The most common group is people with a BMI between 30 and 35. We have tons and tons of data that suggests that there's a lot of benefit to doing weight loss surgery in people in this lower BMI group. However, most insurance policies still use the 1998 NIH criteria, which requires your BMI be over 35 with one health condition related to obesity, or a BMI over 40 if you don't have a health condition. And then the final reason that I see patients who opt to self-pay for their surgery is their insurance company has a very long and tedious and difficult process for being approved for surgery. Sometimes it's 3, 6, even 12 months of supervised weight loss, and many tests and studies and psychological evals, and it really varies. Some insurance companies don't put a ton of obstacles in front of you. Some really make it almost next to impossible to get an insurance authorization. So those patients oftentimes will look at what's required and say, you know what, it's better off if I just pay for it myself. So how much you pay really varies based on where you have your surgery. The most common place outside of the US that people are going to go and have their weight loss surgery is Mexico. And there are some actually pretty decent surgeons and decent hospitals, but there's also some really low quality, quite frankly, dangerous facilities. And telling the difference between the two can be difficult. A sleeve will typically run around $4,000 and a bypass around $5,000, and there's a ton of variation there in terms of what's offered and the safety of these facilities. If you're going to stick to the US, you really have two options. One is an ambulatory surgery center, which is really just a building it's not a hospital, it's just a building, usually in an office building, that's designed to perform lower risk surgeries. We typically only see sleeve gastrectomies performed there, and they'll run somewhere between $8,000 to $12,000. And these facilities, while they're excellent and they have to meet a specific safety standard, they don't have to, for instance, have a physician there overnight, or have a blood bank on site, or oftentimes even be able to run routine blood work in an expeditious fashion. So these centers, while they can be really great for these surgeries, they don't have the same safety net that we see in hospitals. I do all of my self-pay surgery in a hospital, what you see in the US hospitals is somewhere between, say, $13,000 to $25,000 for a sleeve and $15,000 to $30,000 for a gastric bypass. My practice runs kind of on the lower end of this. And what we really see with this is not necessarily higher quality at the higher prices like you do in the rest of the world, but essentially some hospitals say, yeah, we're going to make accommodations for self-pay patients and offer some discounts and make it relatively easy for patients to pay for the surgery themselves at a fair price. Other hospitals say, you know what, that's really not in our best interest. We have this good arrangement with insurance companies, and we don't really want to make any adjustments for the relatively small number of self-pay patients that are out there. So I'm very grateful we work at a hospital that offers a very reasonable price for self-pay surgery. There are financing options available. They're almost always independent of the practice. You're not going to pay the practice monthly. Instead, it's a third party that steps in. Practices are generally small. They don't have the resources of a bank. The two that I see most commonly are Care Credit and Prosper. Another thing to consider when paying for your surgery is that it may be tax deductible. It's based on how much money you make yearly, as well as the cost of the surgery. This is something you can run by your accountant to see if they have any insight or can let you know if this is going to be tax deductible. If you're exploring self-pay options, I think the most important thing for you to understand is what's included in the surgery. For instance, is an overnight stay included? And I've done outpatient gastric sleeve surgery. I've done inpatient gastric sleeve surgery. It's possible to do both safely. I think if you stay overnight, there is an element of safety that's provided. You know, for me, the most acceptable complication rate for surgery is 0%, and I kind of work from there. And I do everything in my power to eliminate complications or any difficulties after surgery. If you're at home and God forbid you have some bleeding, that can be a very, very dangerous situation where in a hospital with all the resources available, an on-site physician, a blood bank on site, that generally is something that we can manage very expeditiously and really intervene before it becomes a serious problem. Are there hidden costs? For instance, are you going to get a bill from the pathologist for $500 in a month after your surgery to look at your normal stomach after it was removed? Are there any differences in the program, in the way the program handles self-pay patients versus insurance patients? One thing I've really tried to work on is making it so that insurance patients and self-pay patients are managed this exact same way. If I have a hospitalist see the insurance patient, I have a hospitalist see the self-pay patient, and we just come up with fair prices for it so that we can offer the surgery and not cut any corners or do anything that might potentially increase your complication rate or expose you to any additional risk. Also, pre-op evaluations. I think all sleeve patients need an upper endoscopy before surgery, and is that covered by insurance or not, and how do you handle that? And that's something that has to be worked out in advance as you move forward with self-pay surgery. And what about post-op medications? Those are truthfully not expensive typically, and that's something you can discuss with your surgery program, but in my practice, if you have a good RX coupon, you're generally going to spend $30 to $40 on your post-op prescriptions. What about complications? Complications are generally not part of the package price, and if you do have the surgery and there are complications, you could be exposed to the risk of having to pay for the care for those complications in addition to the surgery itself. And so while complications are very stressful, once you start adding all of this additional cost and potential for financial ruin or even medical bankruptcy, they can become extremely difficult situations. I've done a lot of self-pay surgery. I'm very grateful we haven't had any significant problems, but that's something I definitely worry about. Some patients are lower risk for surgery than others. The website, michiganbsc.org, I use this on all of my patients, self-pay or insurance pay, to make sure people understand what their risks are of surgery as well as how much weight they're going to lose. And this is, you don't need a special login to get onto this website. It's a little more geared toward medical people, but I think with a little bit of research, you can figure out what your numbers are and how to click the boxes so that you can calculate your own risk for the surgery. And I think if you're considering self-pay and have worries about the complication rate and what your risk is, looking at this and knowing what the chances that you have a serious complication are is important. There's a good chance if you do have health insurance that it would pick up the cost for those complications. So I think that's another question to ask your surgeon. And then finally, there's these short-term insurance policies that you can purchase that'll cover you for $10,000 or $20,000 or $50,000 worth of complications, and that's also something that if you're concerned about, you can purchase. They tend to be pretty costly, so a lot of times when you do the math, it's really not worth it. Also, aftercare is really important. Where's the aftercare going to come from? Is it going to be $250 every time you see someone in your surgery practice for 15 minutes, in which case you're unlikely to follow up with them? Or do they have some fair pricing for follow-up care? If you're traveling, is telemedicine available so you can stay in touch with your surgeon? I offer telemedicine for all my patients who self-pay and travel, and it works out fantastic. And we have actually separate programs. If you want the less expensive option, you can follow up with my nurse practitioner. If you want to follow up with me and have all of your aftercare with me, there's kind of a separate payment that's required. So those are all important things for you to understand going into it. Also, I think it's important to have some form of local support or understanding of, God forbid there is a problem, where would you go, what would you do? Some people like the aftercare and really want a lot of support. Other people think, hey, I've got this Facebook group and online videos and a couple of books and a whole network of friends who've had this surgery, and so I really have a great support network and I don't really need all of that extra care from my surgeon. And so if that's the case, then make sure that you adjust that in terms of your decision making. As far as where you can learn more about it, we have a lot of information about our self-pay program on TucsonWLS.com. Also on my poundofcureweightloss.com, I have information not just about self-pay surgery, but pretty much everything you'd ever need to know about bariatric surgery, from early on in the decision-making process to 5 or 10 years out, as well as tons of information about my nutritional program, A Pound of Cure. And then on Amazon, my book, How Weight Loss Surgery Really Works, also has a lot of info about self-pay surgery and kind of how to make the decision about what surgery to have and how to set yourself up for success after surgery. So if you're considering self-paying for your weight loss surgery, I hope this video was helpful.